My friends, there are moments in the history of nations where the sword begins to glimmer too brightly, where the hammer of justice rings hollow because it strikes not iron but bone, and where the cries of wisdom are drowned in the march of men. Today, the Iranian foreign minister utters words that sound not only like a political caution, but like the bell of an old church tower warning of a coming storm. U.S. involvement would be very dangerous. And so we ask, not as statesmen or soldiers, but as men, what lies beneath such a warning? Every military action carries with it more than tactical consequences. It leaves deep impressions on the human soul, particularly on the people who must live in its aftermath. Political leaders and military strategists may speak in the cold language of operations, targets, and collateral impact, but war is never confined to the battlefield. It spills into homes, hearts, and histories. Behind every targeted strike lies a community forced to pick up broken pieces. Behind every news headline about a fallen commander is a son who will grow up without a father, a mother who will mourn in silence, and a child who will learn the sound of fear before the sound of laughter. What is often forgotten in halls of power is the spiritual cost of such decisions. War deforms not only bodies but beliefs. It twists how generations interpret justice, identity, and hope. When bombs fall, it is not only structures that are shattered, but trust. A boy who sees his neighborhood turn to rubble does not only lose a home, he loses the belief that peace is possible. And when the story of his suffering is not told, when the pain of his people is dismissed as the price of strategy, he begins to believe that his life holds less value in the eyes of the world. This is how conflict becomes self-repeating. Wounds left unhealed breed vengeance. Memory becomes weaponized, and the idea of peace begins to seem like a foreign fantasy, reserved only for others. A commander eliminated may seem a tactical win, but it often plants the seed of 10 more. Violence done in the name of security, without acknowledgement of its human toll, invites a deeper instability, one that no intelligence report can measure. The spiritual war behind every physical war is this: whether we can remember the humanity of the other when vengeance blinds us, and whether we can act with mercy when fear demands force. When we speak of strikes and responses, we must remember that we are speaking also of souls shaped by grief, anger, and the longing for dignity. Until the weight of that truth is carried by those who make decisions, war will continue to echo not just through politics, but through the broken hearts of those left behind. Power, when untethered from humility, becomes a force that corrupts rather than protects. Nations, like individuals, must be governed not only by ambition or self-interest, but by an inner sense of accountability, something higher than political gain or military dominance. The problem arises when leaders and governments begin to believe that their strength entitles them to shape the world as they see fit. That is when power slides into tyranny, not in form, perhaps, but in spirit. It is a subtle shift, but one that turns defenders into aggressors and justice into justification. The most dangerous kind of tyranny is the one that believes it is righteous, for it becomes blind to its own destructiveness. Humility in power means acknowledging the limits of one's knowledge and the consequences of one's choices. It means asking not only, can we intervene, but should we? And what spirit are we carrying into this action? This humility restrains the hand that is too quick to strike and lends wisdom to the heart that must make hard decisions. Without it, power becomes self-reinforcing, feeding off its own victories, deaf to the suffering it causes. In the context of global conflict, such as the rising tensions involving Iran, Israel, and potentially the United States, humility becomes not just a virtue, but a necessity. Without it, powerful nations may act out of fear, pride, or presumption, rather than a true pursuit of peace. Intervention without reflection is not strength. It is recklessness disguised as leadership. It often escalates rather than resolves, multiplies enemies rather than neutralizes them, and alienates allies who once trusted your moral compass. History is full of empires that forgot this truth. They expanded, controlled, and dominated, only to fall under the weight of their own unchecked might. What sustains power is not its size but its self-discipline. To be powerful and yet patient, to be capable of war and yet choose peace, to act but remain teachable. This is what separates tyrants from true stewards. Therefore, any nation wielding power must first bend the knee, not to another state, but to the truth. That truth is simple but often ignored. If you do not govern your power with humility, your power will govern you, and eventually it will destroy what you once claimed to protect. Peace, contrary to popular belief, does not come from dominance or deterrence. It does not emerge automatically from superior firepower or tightly drawn borders. It is forged through restraint, understanding, and often the very courage to walk away from the path of destruction when everything tempts you to take it. It is far easier to pull a trigger than to sit at a table with an enemy. Far easier to send drones into hostile territory than to send diplomats into tense conversation. True strength is not in the ability to destroy, but in the discipline to build. In a world saturated with reactionary politics and escalating conflicts, choosing peace can feel like weakness. Yet it is the opposite. It requires an extraordinary inner fortitude to respond with calm when provoked with violence, to offer dialogue when met with threats, and to show mercy when vengeance seems justified. Anyone can wage war. It takes wisdom to preserve peace. It demands clarity, patience, and a willingness to be misunderstood, even ridiculed, for not retaliating in kind. Nations often fall into the trap of thinking that security can only be purchased with aggression. But history shows again and again that violence breeds violence. A strike may end a threat temporarily, but it often gives birth to another, one more radical, more embittered, more determined. Every war plants the seeds of the next if peace is not its ultimate aim. And peace must not be treated as a luxury to be sought after war, but as the work of every day before war even begins. The courage to choose peace is especially needed in regions where pain runs deep and memories are long. Israel, Iran, the United States, each carries its own scars, its own justifications, its own fears. But courage does not mean denying those fears. It means rising above them. The man who seeks peace does not lack strength. He redefines it. He puts the long-term future of his people above the short-term satisfaction of revenge. He does not seek to silence others through force, but to understand them, even if agreement seems distant. Choosing peace is not the absence of conflict. It is the refusal to let conflict define who we become. It is the choice to hold a mirror to our wrath and say, "You will not lead me." The world rarely lacks conquerors. History is full of leaders who expanded empires, toppled regimes, and imposed their will by force. But what the world has always truly needed, yet seldom possessed, are healers, those who, rather than exploiting conflict, seek to mend it, those who, instead of claiming victory over their enemies, search for a future where enemies need no longer exist. This is the higher calling of nations and individuals alike, to be builders of peace, not merely victors of war. A conqueror may win battles, but often at the cost of trust, of generations marked by trauma, and of legacies poisoned by resentment. The illusion of control gained through force eventually fractures. Peace forged through healing, however, creates something lasting, something capable of withstanding the tempests of history. Healing is not passive. It is not naive. It requires strength, wisdom, and the moral bravery to face wounds rather than inflict them. This kind of leadership does not dismiss the need for defense or deny the existence of evil, but it recognizes that true security does not come from dominance. It comes from restoration. A nation that serves peace heals not only others but itself. It breaks the cycle of retaliation, which otherwise spirals endlessly from father to son, from decade to decade. Every missile avoided, every conversation pursued, every compromise reached becomes a brick in a world less governed by fear. To be a servant of peace is to walk a narrow path. It often means being misunderstood, appearing weak in the eyes of those intoxicated with the spectacle of strength. But real strength does not shout. It listens, it considers, it chooses the harder road. While the world glorifies the quick result, the servant of peace understands the value of slow, steady restoration. This is a spiritual discipline as much as a political one. When Iran warns the U.S. that its involvement would be dangerous, it is not merely a strategic warning, it is a spiritual invitation, an opportunity to ask, will we add fire to fire, or will we offer water? Will we become another empire that acted out of pride, or will we be remembered as a generation that chose to heal? Only one of these legacies endures. The other is lost in ash. In the great myths and moral histories of mankind, the lion and the dragon both roar, but they do so from different hearts. The lion defends, upholds, and protects. The dragon hoards, destroys, and devours. And yet, in times of war and fear, it becomes dangerously easy for a nation to confuse the two. Believe it is acting as the lion of justice while, in truth, becoming the dragon of destruction. This keynote reminds us that even noble intentions, if left unexamined, can morph into something unrecognizably cruel. Every strike made under the assumption of moral clarity must be tempered with the awareness of human fallibility. The moment a nation believes it can do no wrong, it is already on the path to doing great wrong. When leaders stop asking hard questions about motive, impact, and the unseen cost of their actions, they are not leading, they are commanding without conscience. It is precisely in those moments of presumed moral certainty that the deepest atrocities have often been committed. This is why the image of the dragon is so powerful. It represents not just brute force, but the unchecked will to dominate, to consume, and to be feared rather than understood. A nation that sees itself as a righteous lion must constantly examine whether it is behaving instead like the dragon. Are its actions preserving life or extinguishing it? Is it bringing peace closer or further away? These are not abstract philosophical questions. They are the very compass points that determine whether a civilization thrives or falls. To prevent becoming the thing we once opposed, there must be humility in strategy, restraint in strength, and truth in rhetoric. Symbols and narratives may rally people, but reality is not persuaded by slogans. Children still die under bombs, communities still shatter under occupation, and futures still dim under fear, no matter what flag flies over the operation. When power is wielded with no reflection, no accountability, and no sense of shared humanity, it is no longer serving justice. It is serving itself. The lion and the dragon may roar with the same volume, but one stands on the side of peace, and the other only multiplies sorrow. We must ask, which voice are we following, and what have we become while doing so?